Welcome to Get Busy Living with Total Life Concept. I'm Lauren. I'm a national board certified health and wellness coach.
I'm Soma. I am a board certified family physician and has a passion for primary prevention or keeping you from getting sick in the first place.
Well, I'm Chris, proto fitness guy.
And
Fitness
AKA,
guru.
yeah, 30 years of fitness experience. I'm gonna have to start
Master
introducing this
fitness
guy. He won't tell
guru.
everyone. There we go.
Shut and listen.
So today we're answering a question of, do your genetics dictate your fate? And we're speaking to those of you who may have a certain health-related disease and that runs in your family, maybe type 2 diabetes, heart disease, autoimmune conditions. What am I missing?
Those are a lot of them. There's different inflammatory joint conditions that can run, gout. Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, and the common stream of thought is, my family has it, so I'm going to get it. And as the science is advancing, there are certain tests that it can be done where people start to learn about their specific genes. And there are certain genes that may make us more likely to develop certain diseases. But as a result, we may feel powerless as this. And so we want to spend today talking about a little something called epigenetics. Hang in there. If you've never heard this word, we're going to make it really simple for you. So Soma, why don't you go ahead and get us started and tell us what exactly is epigenetics?
So epigenetics is basically what we have some power over. Epigenetics is if our DNA, what we were given, we didn't get to choose our DNA. That was sort of decided at the time of conception. That's our DNA, and that's a blueprint. We don't have any choices over that. Now, epigenetics is that information that's in our DNA going to be expressed? Meaning, is it going to turn into something? So if I have a gene for breast cancer or ovarian cancer or something like that, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be expressed or turned into ovarian cancer or breast cancer. So feeling like, okay, my mom, my aunt, my grandmother, they all had breast cancer. I have patients that have this history. Oh my God, I'm doomed to breast cancer. That's actually not necessarily true. There are things you can do to decrease your risk of expressing those genetics. So that's one way we can look at what is epigenetics, because epigenetics is the expression of those genetics that you were given at conception. So there's all kinds of things, and that's what we're all about here is, what do we have power over? We can't, at this point in human evolution, change our actual DNA. But we can have an impact on both positive and negative on whether those genetics that we have, that we were given, are actually expressed or are turned into something. So there are different things. There's different ways of looking at our genetics. One of the ways I love looking at genetics is some things that we think were actually bad, like type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is very genetic, okay? But there was a reason for it. It was an amazing adaptation for individuals in our past who lived in feast and famine environments. So if you lived in a place where there's lots of food sometimes and very little food other times, having this genetic predisposition to what we now call type 2 diabetes was actually extremely beneficial, because it changed how when we were exposed, when our genetics was exposed to times of famine where we couldn't eat at all, this genetic disposition expressed itself. Its epigenetics kept us safe during those times of where we were starving, where we didn't have any food, where our ancestors couldn't eat. So there are different genetics that we consider a downside, because it was a totally different jungle. We rarely, have times where we're literally starving to death for long periods of time. So that's part of epigenetics, is we have genetic predispositions that if we understand what our actions do or don't do, can help express them or not.
And that's what our business, or TLC, our practice is all about, is empowering people with the things you can control. So Chris, why don't you talk a little bit about the different lifestyle factors that can allow genes to express themselves or not? What are some of the factors that you know of that can impact that? Like food, focus, fitness, all that.
Well, me being on the fitness end, you can't really scratch the surface unless you do it. The body's not dumb. It's not stupid. It's not going to do something that you don't ask it to do. This is what's really so interesting. A lot of people, where they think they have to learn a lot about fitness. It's actually, you have to learn a lot about fitness, and then you have to do it. And then these things, these stimuli that you give your body, causes that body to say, oh, he's giving me that signal, and based on my DNA or pre-packaged wiring, that gets to be expressed. It happens all the time with people, and a lot of times it's seen with around the body type, or some families have predistribution to everybody being obese or everybody being thin, these kinds of things. And the fact is, we don't really have a whole lot of evidence that's pointing to that. When we include people who move regularly, they can kind of change that whole thing around. There's a lot of heavy people in my family.
Well, right, and like to that point of what you just said, what they have found is that what dictates the outcome of your health more than genetics is your zip code. And so people may feel like, okay, all my family is obese, but we have to also ask ourselves, what are the common factors beyond genetics? Right. What is the eating habits of that family? What are the movement?
We had an amazing experience. We lived in a big city, and it was not what we expected, because when you think about a big city, you think about it having access to all kinds of everything. And actually, that wasn't the case. When we lived in a big city, it seemed to us, because we had the experience of living in a small town that had access to a lot of really amazing foods that are local. We didn't have that access because they have to feed millions and millions of people up there. You can't provide local fruits and vegetables to millions and millions of people, but you can in a small town like Durango. So we had a really amazing, eye-opening experience where small town gave us a whole lot more access to a whole lot more outrageous nutrients, and it wasn't based on being in a big city.
Well, and based on that too, where things are located in the grocery store. Because if you walk into certain grocery stores, and this is something I'm very aware of because I'm huge into community, what does community have an impact on a person's health? You walk into the grocery store and the first display is a whole lot of soda. That has an impact on you. But what's really cool and what we have power over is we can recognize, wow, okay, there's a bunch of soda. Is that a good choice for my body? Is that a good thing? My epigenetics will dictate if I drink that soda, is my health going to be better or worse? What sort of things are going to happen? So our environment is incredibly important in how our genetics is able to express itself. So certain behaviors, another thing would be they used to have cigarettes. Cigarettes were out in front. Well, now they're kind of behind the counter, which is helpful in changing certain behaviors. We all know smoking is a risk factor for cancer. Why is that? Okay, smoking makes it more likely that our epigenetics that's already in there is going to express itself. We all have the stories about the people who smoked until they were 93 and they didn't have any problems and everything was great. Uncle Jim, yeah, he was smoking on his deathbed and he was 112.
George Burns.
Yeah, exactly. I get to hear that a lot. Well, those are the rarities, okay? So do we have control over how our genetics express themselves? There are certain behaviors that if we can find a way to not do them anymore, will definitely decrease your risk of expressing some sort of gene for all of the different kinds of cancers. So certain behaviors like lighting something on fire and inhaling the fumes, we only do that with smoking. That's not a natural thing. We don't usually light something on fire and inhale the smoke that's coming out of it, but that's become smoking. And yes, that makes us way more likely to unveil or activate certain genetics that we were given at birth.
Yeah, so we've got, fitness is one of the things that can positively impact the genetic expression, as in it's less likely to express a disease-provoking gene, if that's how you want to say it. Smoking, I think that's not news to hopefully anyone. Your surroundings, your social support, your community, your environment. That's a huge part of this. And we won't go too deep into that. We've got food. Food is one of those that is information. I've always loved that. I've heard that from a couple different mouths, but what you put into your body is information to your body as to whether or not it should express certain genes. And so that's a really interesting way of thinking about food that maybe you haven't thought of before. That this isn't just a way to fill my stomach. It's not just a way to get nutrients, but it's also signaling something to my body. What else? Is there anything you'd add about food?
Food choices cause us to do different things. So some food choices can make us anxious, which might make us more likely to need our cigarette. So learning the links between them and why do I do certain things? Why do I have behaviors that I know aren't necessarily good and might express my genetics in ways that I'd rather they not do? So anxiety can cause people to need to smoke, which then causes them to express genes that cause cancer. So unraveling all of this, instead of just feeling bad about, oh my God, I'm a smoker and da 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 da, I know it's not bad, but I love it and that's what I'm going to do, of asking, why am I doing this? What am I getting from it? And is there a safer way to get what I'm getting from it in some other fashion? So that's the adventure of learning new behaviors and learning how to change our epigenetics, because we have power over epigenetics. We don't necessarily have power over genetics, but we have power over how those genes are expressed in our lives. So it's kind of fun to focus on what can we do, as opposed to, oh my God, it's going to end and I'm going to end up doomed to this predisposed condition.
Yeah, I think it's real interesting when you've got a family life that you've grown up with, and everybody was kind of stressed out when you lived with your family. Now you've stepped away from that family life, and now you've got things like wholesome disciplines where you have a meditation practice that you've seen real life daytime or real time benefits, and so you can kind of short circuit those old patterns of behavior that you might have learned from your family because you've tried some new wholesome disciplines. TLC is all about wholesome disciplines, and what are those things that you can do that are building you up?
Stress may be the root of it all. I mean, the way you spoke about it, it's true that stress is usually the root of the most risky health choices. Smoking, being inactive, food choices.
Glass of water.
Yeah, alcohol, sleep issues, all those things that we tend to focus on in our health are oftentimes triggered by underlying stress, and that's why we are so passionate about focus and developing practices throughout your day that are going to help calm that nervous system down and improve your overall quality of life beyond even just health. So there's so many ways to tackle this, and the hope here is that you leave this video understanding that you have influence over whether or not your genetics express themselves, and hopefully that's empowering to you, and hopefully that makes you feel not doomed by information you may have about your family or your own genetic makeup. I think to the focus point too, I think some people, knowledge isn't necessarily a good thing. Like some people learn that they have certain genes and then it adds stress to their life. And stress is going to always create a negative impact within the body. Well, I shouldn't say always because there's good stress, but stress in this traditional form that we're talking about that tends to have a negative.
Yeah. Stress makes you feel bad. That causes the pit of your stomach to not feel good. And has an impact. So take-home message today is that you can have some power over whether your genetics expresses itself. And that's not to be taken in a negative of if they express themselves that you've done something horrible wrong. It's just when we focus on what we can do, what we do have some influence over, it can be incredibly beneficial in so many different arenas of our life. And one of those arenas is how does our genetics express itself?
Yeah, awesome. Well, hello, whoever just popped in. We're about to sign off, but we hope that you enjoyed this. And if you have questions regarding this conversation of epigenetics, ask them below. We'll answer them in future videos. And we hope you really got something from this video and are feeling good. And just know we're here to help if you ever wonder what you can do to help prevent the expression in a negative way.
And feedback always leads to new ideas for new things to talk about too.
Yeah.
Thanks for.
We love your feedback.
Have a great day. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you.